I've been really interested in how you approach the Icelandic sagas. Spending time in Iceland and getting to know, trying to immerse myself in the heritage, you can't help but get involved in the sagas. My perspective has changed over time, but it has been quite the process to be able to open myself up to actually reading and enjoying the sagas. So maybe you can share a bit about how that process has been for you and what has piqued your interest.
Sure. So let me just step back a bit to give like a frame of reference for what they are. So there's about 40 of these Icelandic family sagas, which are stories of families of the first settlers. They were written about 200 to 300 years after the first settlement, between 200 and 300 years. And so it would be the equivalent of maybe me writing about, George Washington or something, or Thomas Jefferson, or any of the founders of the United States. It was long before me. And they were really written at a time when Iceland was coming under Norwegian control, and there was a fear that being Icelandic, the Icelandic identity would somehow go away and be kind of engulfed by, perhaps a Norwegian identity. The colonization of Iceland would result in that. They were facing kind of similar challenges as we face today, preserving the Icelandic heritage, right? They were saying, oh my gosh, we got to write this stuff down. We got to get this all on paper.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the sagas, I think, is that, although they were written in the 1200s, they really embody like human relationships and characteristics that we can identify with today. Mm-hmm. There is an overlay of other social issues that were going on at the time, which is interesting and important to understand. I think generally, although they had the northern lights and the volcanoes and the glaciers, they really weren't interested in that stuff. It's all about the relationships of the people, which I think makes for sort of like a type of drama that we're all very familiar with when we turn on the television and watch a show on a Saturday or evening or something like that. So you would ask me like my approach to reading them. I think it's a formidable amount of writing. So if you've ever seen the books, the Icelandic Sagas published all together, it's almost like a Encyclopedia Britannica. It just sits on your bookshelf from about 3 to 4 feet long of books. And so that seems overwhelming, certainly to anybody. And what I've found useful is that the stories are really good and really engaging. The writing is very simple, but because there's so much information in them, it's fine to listen to a podcast about a story. There's a great podcast called Saga Thing, which kind of runs through all the different Icelandic sagas, and then go back and read it. Watch a movie about a saga, read a synopsis, and then you'll have like those anchors in your mind so that you can go back and really focus in on the story. Kind of a turnoff to a lot of people is the genealogy. Whenever you start a saga, it starts with a really long genealogy of who this person's great grandparents were, where they came from in Norway, how they got, who were their kids, and it goes on, and you have to wade through that to get to the actual story. And sometimes it's relevant to the story, but one thing that's useful is to draw a little tree. Just have a piece of paper and a pencil next to you, and draw a little tree as you read, so you can just refer back to that when you need to.
I remember you mentioning once when you were first getting into the saga. And what was that process like when you first started to think about reading them?
Well, I think there was always an interest in my family about our heritage, and we had books around. I think I got interested then originally. I didn't really dive in till much later, but I had sort of, perused the sagas or some of them earlier. I don't know. I think there's something about a historical narrative that is dramatic that I think makes it entertaining and inspiring and makes you want to read it. And then there's also this mystery of what is fiction and what is reality, because the sagas write about real people and also real events, but it's clearly also fiction and how it's all put together. And so you kind of, when you read them, you're kind of like, well, I wonder how much of that is true, how much of that actually happened. And as you dig deeper, you can sort of discern what might be real and what might not.
Yeah, fascinating. And so, yes, it is that you write about the sagas and you kind of break them down in I guess, like summary chapters, and maybe you can explain your
Yeah.
thought process behind this.
Yeah. So Bryndís, who's involved with Icelandic Roots, is
Mhm.
when I first started doing this, she said, Jason, I want to help you with this because this is a big deal. And it used to be when I was a little girl, so Bryndís just turned 90, and she grew up in a turf house, at least part of the time. She said people would talk about the sagas around the dinner table, and it was like a part of their daily life. And that's really changed. And so as I was getting going, it's kind of like learning how to ride a bike without training wheels. She would, send me direct messages like, oh, well, consider this or consider that. And then at some point she's like, okay, you get it. You're doing a good job. You keep going. So that was really helpful. I think the reason that I do it and the reason that I want to do it is that I want to keep it going, and I want to keep it alive, and I want to keep people talking about it. And so what I try to do is cover a saga over a course of several months, and I'll go chapter by chapter and summarize them just to get people interested in the story. Every Sunday morning, I'll post another one. That seems to be a way to give someone that can read a Facebook post in a interest group, some sort of regular rhythm. I'm like, oh, okay, what happened this week in the story? And to me, that helps keep it alive and keep people not think of it as something that happened in the past, but as something that is really for us, for everyone.